They were thrown into a blazing furnace. Not for a crime, not for violence, but for refusing to bow to a golden idol. The fire was real. The king was furious. And yet, something unimaginable happened inside those flames. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't see a miracle before the fire. They met God in the fire. And when the king looked into the furnace, he saw not 3, but 4 men walking unharmed in the flames. This isn't just a story about fire. It's about the kind of faith that doesn't flinch. Faith that refuses to bow. Faith that walks with God, even if it means stepping into the heat. In ancient Babylon, a golden idol stood tall, a towering symbol of pride, power, and false worship. King Nebuchadnezzar demanded all people to bow before it, declaring it the god of the empire. The music played, and thousands fell to their knees. But not everyone. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood firm, not out of rebellion, but out of devotion. Their God had said, "You shall not bow to any image." So, even as thousands knelt, they remained unshaken. It was a quiet rebellion. But in heaven, it echoed like thunder. The king's advisors were quick to report them. "Your Majesty, there are 3 Jews who refuse to bow before your statue," they said. Their words were dripping with accusation, but behind their tone was fear, because deep down, they knew real power doesn't need gold. Furious, Nebuchadnezzar summoned the 3. He offered them one more chance. Bow or burn. But their answer shook the throne room. "O king, our God is able to save us. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow." The king's face twisted with rage. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter. So hot, it killed the guards who approached it. But still, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked forward, not because they were fearless, but because they were faithful. They were bound in ropes and thrown into the furnace. Everyone expected screaming, burning, death. Instead, there was silence. And then, movement. The king jumped to his feet. "How many men did we throw in?" he shouted. "I see 4, and the 4th looks like a son of God." The fire didn't burn their skin. It didn't singe their hair. It only burned the ropes that bound them. God didn't keep them from the fire. He joined them in it. Because sometimes, the miracle isn't escape. It's endurance with God beside you. The king, once furious, now trembled at what he saw with his own eyes. He had challenged heaven with his pride, and now stood face to face with its power. In the very fire meant to destroy, something divine was walking freely. Not even the greatest king could deny that a higher authority had stepped in. The silence around the furnace was louder than any trumpet blast. Because in that moment, heaven touched earth in the heart of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar shouted toward the flames, not in anger, but in awe. "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come out, servants of the Most High God." The fire had not silenced them, it had revealed them. Their clothes were untouched, their hair not even singed. And not a trace of smoke clung to them, only the scent of victory. God had answered with fireproof grace. The crowd gasped, stepping back, unsure if they were dreaming or witnessing glory. The fire meant for punishment became a stage for faith to shine. Even the king's strongest warriors had fallen near the furnace. Yet these 3 walked like royalty, with the presence of heaven beside them. This wasn't just about survival, it was a declaration from God himself. No earthly power could match the one who walks in the fire. Nebuchadnezzar fell to his knees. Yes, the king bowed before the fire survivors. He had built idols, but now he recognized a power that no statue could hold. He declared, "Blessed be their God, who sent an angel to rescue them." A pagan ruler became a witness to the real, living God. Because true worship isn't forced by command, it's born in moments like this. Moments where the impossible becomes visible. From that day forward, the decree was changed. No one would be allowed to speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What started as a death sentence became a national testimony. The story spread beyond Babylon, reaching distant lands and hearts. And 3 faithful men became eternal symbols of unshakable faith. All because they chose God over comfort, truth over fear. The fire they faced wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. A test of loyalty, courage, and unseen strength. But where others saw destruction, they found divine presence. Not because they were perfect, but because they trusted the perfect one. God didn't remove them from danger, He stood with them in it. And that's the miracle worth remembering. This story isn't locked in the past, it's alive in every believer today. Because there are still fires we must face, and still idols we must reject. The same God who walked in Babylon's flames walks with us now. When your faith is tested, remember this: He doesn't abandon you in the fire. He joins you there, turns ashes into testimony, pain into purpose. And out of the furnace, He brings you stronger, shining with His glory. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't know if God would rescue them. But they believed He could, and they were willing to die for that truth. Their faith wasn't based on outcomes, it was rooted in obedience. Even if the fire had consumed them, they would have stood firm. Because loyalty to God doesn't depend on safety, it depends on love. And that kind of faith ignites heaven's response. Sometimes, God doesn't save us from the fire, He saves us in it. Because it's in the flames that our chains are burned away. Fear melts, doubt dies, and what's left is unshakable trust. Trials refine what comfort never could. The fire wasn't punishment, it was transformation. And out of it came a faith that could move kings. What if your hardest moment is the very place God chooses to meet you? He didn't stop the furnace, but He stepped into it with them. He didn't silence the enemy, but He overpowered their weapons. God's presence doesn't always prevent the trial, but it always guarantees you're not alone in it. That's the kind of faith story the world needs to hear. In the eyes of Babylon, they were just exiles, nobodies from a conquered land. But in the eyes of God, they were champions of truth and vessels of courage. He didn't choose them because of status, but because of surrender. When they stood before fire, they were already free in spirit. This is what happens when ordinary people hold on to extraordinary faith. They become legends, not in myth, but in the kingdom of God. The story of the furnace isn't just about fire, it's about who walks with you. Because when God shows up, the heat can't hurt you, the smoke can't choke you. His presence changes the environment, flips the outcome, rewrites the ending. That's why we don't just believe in miracles, we believe in Him. And His glory doesn't need to be explained, it reveals itself in moments like these. Moments that leave even kings speechless. If you ever feel surrounded by pressure, fear, or threats, remember this: the God who stood with them stands with you. He's not just a story from the past, He's a firewalker in the present. When the world tries to silence your faith, let your life become the louder voice. Because your stand today could be someone else's hope tomorrow. And that's what real faith does. It multiplies. The furnace was meant to destroy, but it became the birthplace of legacy. God didn't just rescue them, He rewrote the narrative of an entire nation. Where there was once idolatry, there was now reverence. Where there was arrogance, now there was awe. Because when God moves, history bends. And those who trust Him become part of that eternal change. The fire had no power over their bodies, their clothes were untouched. And not even the smell of smoke clung to them. That's not just survival, that's divine demonstration. God didn't bring them out barely alive, He brought them out completely preserved. Because when God delivers, He leaves no evidence of the enemy's hold. Not a scar, not a stain, just a testimony that stuns the world. King Nebuchadnezzar rose to his feet, stunned by what he had witnessed. The very fire he created to destroy them had become a stage for God's glory. He had mocked their God, but now, he bowed before Him. This wasn't just about 3 men anymore, this was about a kingdom being awakened. Because when God reveals His power, even kings must change their tune. And idols fall when true worship rises. That day, a decree was issued across the land. No one was to speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The fire that was supposed to silence their voices became the reason they were honored. God took what was meant for evil and used it to lift their names before nations. Sometimes, your trial becomes the trumpet for your testimony. Let the fire speak, not of your defeat, but of your deliverer. The king didn't just spare them, he promoted them. From prisoners to palace officials in one divine move. That's what happens when God's favor falls. It elevates without explanation. They didn't bow to idols, and yet they stood taller than all. Because obedience to God isn't weakness, it's strength misunderstood by the world. And God loves to honor those who dare to stand when others kneel. Do you feel like you're standing in the fire today? Like the heat of life is too much, and no one sees your pain? Remember, you're not alone, and you never were. The same God who walked with them walks with you now. He may not remove the fire, but He will redeem it. And when you walk out, the world will know God was with you. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is more than history. It's a blueprint for unwavering faith in a trembling world. It tells us we don't need to fear culture, pressure, or persecution. Because truth doesn't bend, and faith doesn't burn. God is still the same, yesterday, today, and forever. And He still walks through fire for His people. Let this story sink deep into your spirit. Not just as inspiration, but as a challenge. Will you stand when the pressure rises? Will you trust when the fire surrounds you? God doesn't need the crowd. He works through the few who dare to believe. You could be the next chapter in His unstoppable story. Fire has always been a symbol of judgment, pain, and purification. But in God's hands, fire becomes a stage of His unmatched power and mercy. It no longer burns, it refines. It no longer destroys, it declares. You may be in a fiery season now, but it's not the end of your story. God is crafting a testimony through the heat you're enduring. When you come out, you'll shine brighter than you ever imagined. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't know how God would save them. They didn't demand a miracle, they just refused to bow. Their courage wasn't based on outcome, but on conviction. This is what true faith looks like. It stands even when rescue is uncertain. God honors those who honor Him, not for what they'll gain, but because their hearts are already His. Sometimes, the greatest miracles come in the fire, not before it. You might be asking God to pull you out, but He wants to meet you inside it. There's a presence you discover in pain that you'd never know in peace. And there's a nearness to God that only comes when the flames surround. Don't just pray for escape, pray for encounter. Because the fire may reveal the fourth man walking with you. What if your trial isn't about punishment, but promotion? What if the struggle is heaven's way of preparing you for the spotlight? These three men were unknown before the fire, but after it, their names echoed through history. God sometimes lets the heat rise to make your faith rise with it. You're not breaking, you're becoming. Not falling apart, you're being forged into purpose. In a world begging you to blend in, God is calling you to stand out. These men weren't loud, they were firm. They didn't argue, they obeyed. And their silence roared louder than the king's threats. Your boldness doesn't need noise, it needs faith. Even quiet obedience can shake empires. Never underestimate what God can do through one obedient heart. The story of the furnace is not about fire. It's about who's in it with you. It's not about escape, but about presence. The flames didn't change them, the presence of God preserved them. He didn't put the fire out, He put Himself in it. And when God steps into your situation, everything shifts. Your fire becomes His platform. Let this not just be a story you watch, but a faith you live. God still walks with those who refuse to compromise. He still honors hearts that choose Him over comfort. And He still delivers, not always from the fire, but always through it. You are never alone, even when it feels like you are. Because the God of the furnace is still the God of today. Nebuchadnezzar stared into the fire, expecting ashes. But what he saw shattered every belief he held. There weren't just three men inside, there was a fourth. And the fourth looked like a son of the gods, radiating divine glory. God didn't just save them, He revealed Himself to a pagan king. Even unbelievers recognize God's presence when He moves. God could have rescued them before the fire. But He wanted the king, and the nation, to see His glory. Your suffering may be public because your breakthrough will be, too. Sometimes, the miracle isn't just for you, it's a message to the world. God uses fire not just to refine you, but to reveal Himself. Let your trial become His testimony. The fire burned everything, except what mattered. Their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. God didn't just protect them, He erased every trace of harm. That's the kind of deliverance only heaven can provide. When God brings you out, He restores what was lost. And adds glory you never expected. Sometimes, the fire doesn't burn you, it burns off the chains. The ropes that had bound them were gone. Only their freedom remained. God allows fire to destroy what held you, not what made you. He uses pain to strip away fear, doubt, and limitations. What imprisoned you before the fire will no longer have power after it. You're stepping out freer than you went in. Nebuchadnezzar couldn't ignore what he had seen. He proclaimed the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as supreme. One act of faith changed a kingdom's direction. You may think your obedience is small, but it echoes beyond your life. When you trust God openly, even kings must bow to truth. Faith can break through palaces and thrones. God didn't just deliver them, He promoted them. The same king who threatened their lives gave them positions of power. He took them from fire to favor in one divine move. Never forget, your fire might be the doorway to your next level. Promotion often comes after pressure. Let the fire refine you, because glory is waiting on the other side. This story isn't ancient history, it's a living promise. You may not face a furnace, but you'll face pressure. And like them, you can choose boldness over compromise. God still walks with those who walk with Him. And when you stand for God, heaven stands with you. The flames will pass, but your faith will remain. The courage of these men didn't begin in the fire. It was built over years of quiet faith and bold convictions. They honored God in private long before they honored Him in public. Your furnace moment will reveal what you built in secret. Private worship always prepares you for public warfare. Let faith be your lifestyle, not just a reaction to crisis. The world will always try to rename you, reframe you, and tame your faith. But they never answered to Babylon, they answered to God. Their true identity wasn't tied to the empire but to eternity. Culture may press you to compromise, but heaven calls you higher. When your name is written in heaven, no label on earth can define you. Stay anchored to who God says you are. Even in leadership, they chose loyalty to God over favor with man. They didn't seek influence, they sought obedience. And because they honored God, He honored them before nations. You don't need to chase platforms when you carry divine purpose. Let your influence rise from your integrity, not ambition. God exalts those who bow only to Him. Your fire may not come with flames, but with pressure, silence, and fear. Faith isn't always loud, sometimes it's choosing not to bend. In a world on fire with compromise, standing still is a loud testimony. Don't underestimate the power of peaceful resistance. When your life speaks truth, even kings will listen. Let your stillness be a sermon. The furnace was meant to destroy, but it became their altar. God turned the weapon of the enemy into the stage for His glory. That's the God who makes ashes into altars and fire into favor. What's sent to break you might be where God reveals Himself. Your lowest place might hold your highest purpose. Every fire has the potential to become holy ground. They didn't ask God to change the king, they just refused to change themselves. But in the end, God changed the king through them. Transformation begins when believers stay true, even under pressure. You never know who's watching your stand of faith. It might just lead someone else to believe. Live boldly, others' destinies might depend on it. The God who walked in fire still walks with us today. He hasn't changed, and neither has His power to deliver. Your furnace moment will pass, but His presence never will. You're not walking through this alone. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you are never abandoned. God still shows up in the fire. Faith doesn't mean you won't face fire. It means the fire won't face you alone. When you walk with God, even flames obey Him. Trials aren't signs of His absence. They often reveal His nearness. What looks like abandonment is often divine strategy. God doesn't always rescue you before the fire. Sometimes He rescues you in it. And when He does, you come out without even the smell of smoke. The king saw not 3, but 4 men in the fire, one like a son of God. Even the enemy had to testify of God's presence. When God shows up, even unbelievers will recognize His power. Your life can become undeniable evidence of His glory. When people see your survival, they'll see your Savior. God uses your fire to reveal Himself to others. After the fire, they were promoted, because they passed the test. God doesn't just deliver you, He elevates you. Every trial holds a throne if you stay faithful. Your greatest trial can unlock your greatest testimony. Let faith carry you, and God will position you. He always honors obedience, especially when it costs something. This story is not just history, it's prophecy. God still walks with the faithful. He still shuts flames. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if you're facing your own furnace, don't fear. You might not see him right away, but he's already inside, waiting. Your fire has already been filled with his presence. The fire didn't change them, it revealed who they already were. In your trial, remember, you're not becoming strong, you are strong. The fire doesn't define you, your faith does. Let the flames purify, not destroy. Let the heat prove what's eternal. You're built for this, not because of you, but because of the one who walks with you. This was more than survival, it was a holy demonstration. Their story still speaks to those who feel surrounded by heat. You are not forgotten, not forsaken, not alone. Every fire has a fourth man. Every trial has a hidden helper. And every faithful believer has a God who answers with fire. He doesn't just save, he shows up. Don't just hear this story, live it. Stand boldly. Pray faithfully. Walk into fire if you must. And trust that he will meet you there. Because the fire isn't your end, it's the place where God begins. The moment you step in, heaven steps closer. You're not walking through flames, you're walking with God. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Click like to let others find this message. Subscribe so you never miss another powerful Bible story. And comment below, what fire has God brought you through? Your story could strengthen someone else's faith. Let's build a community of bold believers, together.